On the evening of May 6, 1937, the LZ-129 Hindenburg emerged from a layer of low storm clouds over Lakehurst, New Jersey. It moved with a ghostly silence, its silver skin streaked by a heavy, persistent rain. At 803 feet, the airship was 50 feet longer than the United States Capitol. Its sheer volume occupied 3 football fields, a scale of engineering that made it the largest aircraft ever constructed by man. Inside the hull, passengers moved through a world of tailored luxury. They occupied private sleeping cabins, relaxed by a lightweight aluminum piano, and dined on multi-course meals, watching the landscape through massive windows. This cross-section reveals the reality hidden just behind the dining room walls. Occupying nearly the entire internal volume of the ship were 16 massive cells containing 7 million cubic feet of hydrogen. The boundary between the elite passengers and this explosive payload was incredibly fragile. Only layers of cotton and a skeleton of perforated aluminum separated the living quarters from the lifting gas. The creators and passengers were so captivated by the ship's majestic scale and smooth, silent flight that the underlying danger became a secondary thought. The obsession with building something this grandiose effectively blinded them to the catastrophe suspended just inches above their heads. German engineers originally designed the Hindenburg to use helium, an inert gas that cannot burn. They were fully aware that hydrogen was a compromise that brought life-threatening risks. However, the United States controlled the world's only viable helium supply. Fearing the gas would be used for military purposes, the American government enforced the Helium Control Act, banning its export to foreign nations like Germany. Faced with this embargo, the leadership of the Zeppelin company chose to proceed anyway. They redesigned the ship for hydrogen, refusing to scale back their plans for a transatlantic service that would showcase German technological prowess. This decision ignored decades of brutal evidence. Before the Hindenburg ever took flight, 26 other hydrogen-filled airships had already burned in accidental fires, killing hundreds of people. The drive for national prestige and the desire to maintain the ship's massive dimensions overrode basic engineering safety. The Hindenburg was sent into service relying on the same volatile physics that had already claimed dozens of its predecessors. The Hindenburg's final crossing was plagued by Atlantic headwinds. By the time it reached New Jersey, the ship was 12 hours late, and its scheduled return flight to Europe was already fully booked. Captain Max Pruss hovered off the coast, waiting as a front of heavy thunderstorms passed over the landing field. He was under immense pressure to land as quickly as possible to begin servicing the ship for its next journey. When the rain lightened, Pruss initiated a flying moor. Instead of bringing the ship all the way to the ground, he dropped mooring lines from 200 feet in the air so the ground crew could winch the massive vessel down to the mast. Below, the landing crew and Navy sailors grabbed the heavy mooring ropes. They worked to stabilize the Leviathan, unaware of the invisible electrical charge building between the ship and the atmosphere. The decision to perform a high-altitude moor while the atmosphere was still recovering from a thunderstorm left the Hindenburg lingering in a highly unstable and electrically charged column of air. The surrounding storm had heavily ionized the air, saturating the atmosphere with static electricity. A critical detail of the Hindenburg's construction now became a death trap. Its outer fabric skin was separated from the internal duralumin metal frame by small, non-conductive wooden positioning pegs. As the airship flew through the charged air, its fabric skin accumulated a massive positive charge. But because of those wooden pegs, that electricity could not flow into the internal metal skeleton, which remained completely uncharged. This electrical gap turned the entire Hindenburg into a giant battery. It was a massive flying capacitor, holding an enormous amount of energy trapped between its skin and its skeleton. While the ship hovered, the crew realized the tail was flying heavy. They frantically valved hydrogen from the rear cells and dropped water ballast to bring the ship into trim, inadvertently creating a cloud of leaking gas near the rear upper fin. The ingredients for a catastrophe were now in place, a cloud of explosive gas trapped inside a highly charged electrical capacitor, waiting for a single connection to the Earth. At 7:21 p.m., the mooring ropes hit the wet soil of the airfield. The wet fibers of the rope were highly conductive. The moment they touched the earth, electrons rushed up the lines, instantly grounding the ship's internal metal skeleton. This grounding created a massive electrical differential between the now neutral frame and the positively charged skin. A high-intensity spark of static electricity jumped the gap between them. The spark arced directly into the hydrogen that had pooled near the rear fin during the landing approach. Igniting the gas was the predictable consequence of grounding an unshielded capacitor in a highly flammable environment. Once the mooring lines touched the soil, the physics of the storm made an explosion inevitable. The fire ripped through the interior, leaping from gas cell to gas cell in a matter of seconds. The entire rear of the ship was consumed instantly. In 34 seconds, the aluminum frame melted and collapsed. As the ship lost its buoyancy, the Inferno crashed to the airfield, forcing passengers and crew to jump for their lives from the burning wreckage. Because of the massive press presence at the landing, the destruction was captured by 5 newsreel cameras and broadcast to the world, accompanied by Herbert Morrison's iconic, horrified commentary. By the next morning, nothing remained but the blackened, skeletal remains of the duralumin frame. The Hindenburg was the final, brutal proof that chemistry and physics cannot be ignored. Its end was the inevitable result of a project that chose monumental prestige over the basic laws of nature.